everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I have an important meeting at 1 o'clock, so I'm going to endeavor to be a little bit expeditious here with my presentation to allow for questions. First of all, I just wanted to say thanks to our small businesses in Manitoba. They have adhered to our public health orders before and during the lockdown and now have the chance to reopen their doors safely. I want to thank them. I know all Manitobans appreciate their efforts. And I know that all of us welcome the additional opportunities to secure the goods and services that we need and to help create jobs for our friends and neighbors around the province as well. I remind Manitobans, I thank Manitobans for their patience and for their adherence to our public health orders as well. But as I cautioned last week, we're not out of the woods yet. I said last week winter hadn't showed up, but I think by the temperature today it might have showed up now. This is, of course, something that Manitobans are well used to and well prepared to defend themselves against. But there's also the issue of COVID variants. And COVID variants are showing up all around the world. Thank goodness not here in Manitoba as of yet, but in over, I am told, 40 countries. We're seeing COVID variants. They're virulent. They are, according to initial research, potentially up to 30% more fatal and more transferable as well. There is a real danger with those variants, and that variant reality is very real, and it's resulted in a dramatic surge in many other jurisdictions' case numbers, not just England, not just South Africa, Brazil, but many other countries as well. And we are now seeing cases in Canada, including a tragic outbreak in Ontario in a seniors' home. So I say this because I want to remind Manitobans to be careful. I want you to be careful. I want you to adhere to our rules, our public health rules, as Dr. Roussin has outlined them. Two people. Pick two people, and those same two people will be your new contact opportunity for the next few weeks. So today, out of an abundance of caution, realizing that our vaccine supply is not only limited, but has been more severely limited in recent days as a consequence of decisions made by the manufacturers, and because of that abundance of caution that is necessary at this point in time, making two announcements today. First of all, I am calling on the federal government, in support of the federal government imposing greater security at our international borders for returning travelers. And by that, I mean let's defend against these, not only COVID, but COVID variants as well. These issues were discussed last week with the Prime Minister, and I want to add Manitoba's voice to the voices of other premiers who have spoken in support of the moves that need to be made to make sure that protection is real. Secondly, after conferring with our public health officials and Dr. Roussin specifically, we are going to amend our public health orders to ensure that anyone returning to Manitoba, including Western Canada, must self-isolate for a period of 14 days. Premièrement, j'appelle le gouvernement fédéral à imposer une plus grande sécurité à nos frontières internationales pour les voyageurs internationaux de retour. Deuxièmement, nous nous sommes entretenus avec le Dr. Roussin et nous allons modifier nos ordonnances de santé publique pour nous assurer que quiconque retourne au Manitoba, y compris dans l'Ouest canadien, doit s'isoler pendant une période de 14 jours. This is being done out of an abundance of caution to protect Manitobans. The variant is not just in Eastern Canada, as I referred to earlier. It is in Western Canada as well. There have been cases already in British Columbia, cases already in Alberta, and we do not want these variants, whether it's the British, the South African version, or some other, in Manitoba. So now is not the time for non-essential travel. We all need to do our part to keep each other safe. We need to limit the contacts we have, and we need to maximize the safety that we all desire. Any questions, I'm happy to take.
Thank you, Premier. Reporters are reminded we'll have one question and one follow-up today, beginning with Global and Joe.
Hi there, Mr. Premier. The measures you're calling on the federal government to take at the border, what kind of measures are you thinking?
Well, we need to step up our enforcement, first of all, of existing orders. We have existing prohibitions already for entry of non-Canadians, but we need to have additional restrictions in terms of those who are traveling, returning to the country. And restrictions also have to be brought into place and made real by the federal government, and enforcement has to follow.
And for the bringing back the 14-day self-isolation for travelers from Western Canada, why now and not before when the numbers were much higher? Is it because of the new variant concerns?
Yeah, that's not the only concern, Joe, but it's a real concern. We're seeing the presence of these variants growing around the world. We're seeing a number of cases appearing in Canada, and we're seeing significant problems in the UK, South Africa, and many other countries. This is an article from the Globe and Mail today. British variant more deadly. Researchers say 30% more deadly, according to initial research. So there's real reason for concern, and we're acting out of a sense of concern and out of an abundance of caution. We feel these measures are necessary now.
From the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you. Mr. Premier, what will be, for the 14-day self-isolation, what will be the rules for people who live on the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border? Will they be, if they go across for a quick trip, they have to self-isolate, or can you just kind of just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Dr. Roustan and I talked about that. There's normal interaction that is customary and in fact, in many cases, is considered essential on our borders with Saskatchewan and to some degree with Ontario. And this order is not designed to stop people who are, 2 miles away from, or 17 miles away from Yorkton and used to shopping there from shopping there. But these requirements are designed to stop non-essential travel of not specifically air, but air travel in particular in our country without requirements for self-isolation being imposed, as has been the case up till now for returning travelers from Western Canadian destinations.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, have you got any sense of when this could be lifted? Is it more when COVID cases decline, or is it about the variant specifically declining?
Well, let's be clear. We're in a marathon. We're not in a sprint. I think that this talk about the vaccine being the cavalry is dangerous anytime, and especially when you see the interruptions in the flow of vaccines. It emphasizes to Manitobans that you can't let your guard down. So I guess what I'm talking about today is play defense. Remember to play defense now. We're fighting against COVID. We're fighting against variants of COVID that perhaps our vaccines won't even work against. So we have a lot of reasons for caution. We are focusing our vaccine efforts on getting the quality vaccine regimen out that protects our most vulnerable people. Our seniors and seniors' homes will be protected as a consequence of the vaccine program. The second vaccines will be delivered in the next few days. That's great news. And our frontline workers, of course, are a top priority as well. And the vaccine team will be releasing information on future prioritization, but that can only work if there's vaccines here. And so that's going to take time. And clearly we're behind Slovenia, Lithuania, and you could name a dozen other countries. So we're not in a great position to let our guard down ever in the foreseeable future on COVID. And some are speculating that restrictions will have to remain for significant periods beyond this year as well because of the variant dangers.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Scott.
Hi, good afternoon, Premier. Scott Belk, Winnipeg Sun. Sorry, maybe you said it. Is this immediate? Does this come in right away? If not, when will this order be amended?
Public Health Office will determine the date. We had speculated, but they're doing a presser here in a few minutes' time, and I think they'll verify the date. We had talked about Friday at midnight, but again, I'll leave the public health officials to establish the exact date of the imposition of these new restrictions.
Okay, and just another question. There's been a lot of concern from parents out there. They haven't been seeing the school releases about like cases in schools. They haven't come out. I heard one person saying about 200 cases since December 31st, but very few letters have gone out to parents. Has the province stopped sending those letters out to parents or posting them online?
My knowledge, Scott, but it's a great question to ask. I think Dr. Atwell is going to be available to you in a few minutes' time, and he'll be able to address that question.
From CBC Manitoba, Bart.
Mr. Premier, just to clarify, the people in Manitoba border communities cross that border. What about the people in Saskatchewan and Ontario border communities? Can they come in and go back as well?
My understanding is that that'll be up to the province they're returning to, Bartley, not us. But, we'll have, again, the public health officials will work on the details. My understanding from my discussion with Dr. Roussin earlier today is that he didn't intend these orders to create a sort of a disaffected result for people who normally travel from, a bordered community across to get their hardware and groceries and that type of thing.
Thanks for that. Would you support additional resources into screening more samples, more tests of various sorts for the COVID variant?
Yeah, that was another part of our discussion this morning. Also, yes, I just support a discussion on that and take the direction of our public health officials on that. Also, in terms of airport security and restrictions or additional testing that might be made available at our airports, there are some test pilots going on in Ontario and Alberta that I understand could be something that Barry Rempel over at the Airport Authority might be receptive to. So that discussion's underway, I understand, and we'll look forward to seeing what else we can do to make sure that we're not just keeping the variant out, but doing a great job of protecting our population from the possibilities of COVID expanding, either the COVID-19 or the variants thereof.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Hi, Premier. How will this be enforced? We see that most people follow the rules, but there are always some that don't. Is there going to be a step up in terms of enforcement to make sure that people follow the self-isolation?
Those discussions are already underway. We have had dozens, as you know, we've had dozens of fines, tickets and consequential fines as a result of people violating the public health orders. Hundreds, in fact, dozens specifically related, though, to violations of the travel isolation period. And so I would emphasize to all Manitobans that we're in this together and follow those recommendations. There's a reason for them. They're there to protect you. The federal government is right now in discussion. I understand they may have an announcement to make in the next day or two about their plans. I'm just adding my voice to other premiers who have raised their concerns and support for additional restrictions to be brought in federally for international returning travelers as well. And so whether international or domestic, travel is not recommended. It is strongly discouraged. And with the presence of these new variants and their virulence, it is very, very important that we all recognize we must do everything we can to limit our contacts and to limit our travel.
And more generally, when it comes to infractions, is the province giving any thought to increasing the level of fines? Because some provinces have got higher fines on both individuals and businesses.
We haven't had discussion, there may have been discussion at some level, Steve. I haven't been part of a discussion around increasing fines. I have been part of a discussion around increasing enforcement of the existing measures because we are going to expand these requirements for isolation. There may be the need for us to refocus in some manner our existing resources or add to them. But I want to make clear that we're serious. If I have a regret from last year, I would suggest it was that we were trying too hard to educate, perhaps, and not enough maybe to make it clear that there were serious consequences if you didn't want to abide by the rules. So we don't want to make those mistakes again. We want to learn from them. And so having these penalties in place for those who choose to shirk the rules is important. And we'll continue to focus on enforcement as a necessary part of protecting one another.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Mr. Premier. I'm just wondering, do you envision this amendment with regards to travel to the public health order as indefinite, more than just, okay, it's going to be in place for at least 2 weeks and then we'll see? Do you envision this as more of an indefinite order because of the variants and the vaccines and everything you mentioned?
Well, if you tell me that the variant is for an indefinite period, I'll tell you for sure that this is for an indefinite period, but I don't have that knowledge. These variants are posing major concerns to governments all over the country. I'll just read you what leading researcher from Britain said. He said, researchers have come to the conclusion that the British variant known as B117 is as much as 30% deadlier than COVID. He says, it's not as if this research had just come up overnight. We've been working on this for weeks, and there's quite a lot of evidence, and the effect is not small. Other studies, by the way, haven't said 30% more deadly. Other studies that I'm familiar with have said as much as 70% more deadly. So these measures are necessary to protect us against a more deadly version of the coronavirus that is not, as some would sadly hope, a short-term thing. I hope, of course, that we can get vaccines here and that'll help, but the vaccines are against COVID-19, and so that doesn't give the assurance against variants necessarily. The science is not anything but in its infancy. We need to keep our guard up. We need to play defense. We need to be very, very careful now, and that's the reason for the expanded travel isolation requirements.
Mr. Premier, I'm wondering, based on listening to Dr. Rusin yesterday, if I'm a restaurant or gym owner of these businesses that still can't open, should I expect not much to change in just over 2 weeks when the next public health order has to be signed? Do you envision us not much changing significantly when that one expires?
We're in a dynamic time. It's difficult to make predictions anytime in a dynamic time, so I'm not going to do that. I'll simply say, so far in Britain, this is the combination of things that have happened. In Britain, they have had more than 6.5 million people inoculated. They have a vaccine there. They topped 400,000 people over the weekend alone. And they've also had 50,000 cases a day of the virus. You can't let your guard down just because you have a vaccine in the window here. It may be coming, it may not. For us in Canada, it's going to come later than many other parts of the world. My point being, the best way to protect our economy and our health is to protect both simultaneously. And that means to fight against COVID, play defense. If you can play defense well, and in the coming days I'm hoping there'll be compelling evidence that Manitobans are following the health orders, then there are chances that we may be able to help our small business people to reopen even more than we already have. But it is all contingent on us doing the right things to fight COVID, and that's what this measure today is all about.
From City TV, Stephanie.
Mr. Premier, flights are still coming into the Winnipeg airport from Minneapolis, Eastern and Western Canada. I just wanted to check to see what is being done to ensure those travelers are abiding by the 14-day quarantine, and now that it's for Western Canada as well, if any additional measures will be put in place there.
Well, the international travel rules are those of the federal government, and that's what we're urging them to enforce and to step up, quite frankly, and to do some restrictions also for outgoing Canadian travelers so that we're not encouraging people to leave the country, because clearly at some point they're going to want to come back. And when they come back, we don't want them bringing COVID or a variant with them when they come back. So stepping up the rules around travel, making sure there's additional enforcement are critical to this. And so again, premiers have been urging the federal government on these measures for some time, and now I'm encouraged to hear word that the federal government may be proposing to take some action in the very near future. So that's good. In terms of the rule changes for us, we have maintained some of the most stringent restrictions in the country. This was not just after we had the big push up in November, as we all remember. This was before that. And so one of those restrictions we maintained through the entire year was that we required self-isolation for returning travelers from Eastern Canada. Now we're expanding that to add that to the whole country. So this is not solely, again, I'd emphasize, not solely because of the variant realities, But it is a reality that we need to face, and so these restrictions will apply now and going forward.
I also wanted to ask, what are we currently doing to test for the variant? Are all samples undergoing the further testing to see if it's B117?
Yeah, that's a good public health question to answer, and I won't get into the medical expertise that we have here. I want the folks who are the experts to answer your questions in respect to that, Stephanie.
From the Free Press, Carol.
Hi, Premier. Do you have any misgivings about the NHL teams traveling throughout Canada with the variant now that it's a threat and it's here in Canada?
I'm concerned on a lot of levels, Carol, and that's probably pretty clear from my tone today and the comments I'm making. But I have been very impressed. I know Dr. Roussin would say the same. The public health officials met with, I'm not sure if they met with Mark Chipman, but they met with Jets executives. They were briefed by the NHL on their entire protocol, and they were most impressed by the measures that they're taking to protect their players and everyone else. So I don't think that they have expressed misgivings in respect of that or regrets in hindsight. But again, that would be a question you might want to ask the public health officials as well.
And Premier, your MLA, James Teitzma, traveled through Western Canada against public health directives over the holidays. Why has he not faced any disciplinary action?
Yes, he did, as did 3 NDP MLAs, which is yet to be reported by your paper, and yes, he has faced disciplinary action.
From CHVN, Taylor.
Hi, good afternoon. If someone has received 2 of the COVID-19 vaccines, will they need to isolate?
Well, again, the public health officials will give you the details on that, but I would say absolutely, and we'll let them answer the question. The benefit of our approach in Manitoba, and I want to applaud the work of our vaccination team. You'll learn more about them in briefings in the next few days, but these are, frankly, dozens and dozens of our best health experts in other various aspects of logistics and management and planning that have been working as a team very, very well, and their planning resulted in us defending our system against the delays, I don't mean federal delays, but the delays caused by the federally contracted companies not being able to supply vaccines. And that meant that we were able to get the second vaccines out better than most other provinces. I think right now we're 3rd in the country in administering second doses. Why does that matter? Well, because the second dose is where you get the most protection. And many other provinces are not following the recommendations of the manufacturer in this respect. They've decided to delay or postpone the giving of the second dose with a desire to give out more of the first dose. But I would explain our approach. Our vaccination team has recommended and is following, has protected Manitobans better by making sure that when there's a disruption in the supply chain, we don't have to disrupt our appointment schedule, and that by delaying some of, or deferring, holding back some of our vaccines, against that possibility, we're able to get the second vaccine out more readily than other jurisdictions. Why does that matter? According to the New England Journal of Medicine, the COVID Pfizer vaccine's efficacy with one vaccine is 52% after the first dose, 95% after the second. So we want to make sure we get that second dose out, and we are working, we're not, as I've said before, going to substitute safety for speed. We want to make sure that our most vulnerable people, right now it's our seniors in our care homes and our frontline workers, are protected against COVID. And so this is why we're doing the distribution system the way that we are here in Manitoba.
And if someone's coming back into the province after doing essential travel, such as for work, are they still going to have to isolate for these 2 weeks?
Dr. Roos and I talked about that. I think the intention is to allow those exemptions to continue, but there is discussion to make sure, because apparently some people who've been given the right to travel for essential purposes have used it to travel for vacations, and that is not on. That's not, that's a misuse of the privilege you've been given. So essential purposes, that's the reason for an exemption on the isolation requirements, but going for a ski trip at Lake Louise is not a reason for an exemption for you to travel.
Our final reporter this afternoon from CBC National, Cameron.
Hi, Premier. Cam McIntosh here. Talking about tougher restrictions from the federal government and conversations you've had with other premiers, is there a consensus on what those tougher restrictions should be or what they might look like?
No, Cam, to be honest, I don't think there is. As there is often around the table with 10 provincial leaders, 3 territorial leaders, there'll be a diversity of views. Some premiers have called for a total travel ban. We're not doing that today, but we are calling for a stepping up of the restrictions, and we believe that a total travel ban may be something the federal government needs to consider seriously. I respect that the federal government has to make this call, and that's why I'm not trying to be overly prescriptive with what Manitoba wants. I recognize they have a difficult decision to make. I'm simply adding my voice to those of the premiers who have said, make a decision on this, and doing nothing is not an option. You need to step it up. You need to make sure that we're fighting the battle against COVID, and we have to make sure we're fighting the battle against the variants of COVID as well. It's emerging as a greater concern with every passing day, and we need to do more to protect Canadians from this very deadly virus.
And in terms of the tools that you have here in Manitoba in terms of ground travel from our neighboring provinces, any thought to going back towards a move towards checkpoints or information points, or just asking people why they're crossing the border? You saw a bit of that.
Not in terms of checkpoints. We, those of us who know Manitoba-Saskatchewan border know that would be a useless waste of time. But the fact of the matter is we have continued with our Ready, Safe, Grow exercise and others to promote awareness among the general public, and that has been stepped up in recent days as well. So we have ad campaigns that are underway and that are going to be beefed up. We have information out there. And I think, quite frankly, I've said it before, but I have tremendous faith in Manitobans doing the right things now, understanding that these are difficult times and perilous times for our population, and that we all need to do our part. We're all in this together. Thanks to everybody, and sorry to, I hope you didn't think I was rushing my answers too much today, but I do have some other things on the go. I just wanted to say, again, a special thank you to all of you who have been supportive of our small business community. We're going to continue to support our small business community. We've done it all the way through this pandemic. We're going to continue to. Right now, we have discussions underway with leading business advisors helping us in terms of shaping how we support additional investments in giving the necessary strength that they need to get through this perilous time. We've done the bridge programs and the gap programs. We're waiting for the federal government to give us details. Chrystia Freeland has talked about support. Minister of Finance Chrystia Freeland has spoken about supports for small business, but we haven't got the details from the federal government. We need those details in terms of what supports are the federal government planning to put out there so that we complement and support and work together as best as possible. We put $50 million in the window already for additional programming support that we believe, in addition to the hundreds of millions of dollars we've already invested in supporting our small business community, that we think will be well deployed based on the advice from our business leaders. And we are also offering supports to our beleaguered restaurant and hospitality industries as well. But we're not closing the door on additional supports at this point in time, because COVID is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we are going to continue to partner with our business community, in particular our small business community, to assist them in any way we possibly can. Thanks, everybody.